Still recovering from the weekend. I'll be happy if I don't do that again for the rest of the year. It was a lot of fun. It was great to hang out with a lot of friends that we hadn't hung out with before. But yes, needed a nap every day since the weekend, and today's Thursday when I'm recording this. So it's been an interesting week. I finally got a part-time job offer today, which I'm super excited about, and I'll be starting next week. So I've got 20 hours of confirmed work each week with a US company. The rate of pay is good, and it means that I am going to have a whole lot less free time than what I've been used to. But it also means that I've actually got some definite income coming in, which is very exciting, and it's a big change for me. For those of you who watched the video from about 5 or 6 weeks ago where I lost one of my biggest clients, this is very good news, let's say. So I'm super excited about it. It's working for a supplement company, and I'll tell you a bit more about what they're doing once I learn more about their particular supplements that they sell and the efficacy of them, and I'll do my own research, my own study. I'll tell you a bit more about that in some future videos. If you're new here, g'day, I'm Rod. I'm from Sydney down under in Australia. I like to talk about the carnivore way of eating. I started on the carnivore diet around about, I've kind of lost count now, about 140 days ago. Feel absolutely brilliant most of the time, except for when I got carried away with my friends on the weekend, but that's a pretty rare thing. And I like to talk about mindset. I like to talk about what motivates us, psychology. I'm not qualified in anything. I'm not a medical doctor or anything like that. It's just me talking about whatever I feel like. So if this is your first time here, then welcome. I hope you'll stay. And I do have a few dishes to do, so I better get on with it. The old coffee mug, it's a ripper. We like to use that word a lot in Australia, ripper. It means something that's really good. Speaking of my debaucherous weekend, I was talking to one of my coaching clients yesterday on a Zoom call, and he was saying how he'd been studying the carnivore diet for quite a long time, and he understood everything about it, but he's just having a lot of trouble with implementation. And when we started to dig into it, one of the biggest problems that he was having was social occasions. And what would happen was he would go to a friend's house or go and watch the footy with his mates, and next thing he knows, he's had 7 or 8 beers, and then he feels awful. His rosacea flares up the next day, and there's the socializing and the friendship and the fun that goes along with that, and then there's the consuming too much beer, too much alcohol, and suffering the consequences of that when he didn't really want to. And so we ended up talking more about emotional and behavioral triggers more than anything else. And I think that's a pretty important thing when it comes to following any eating protocol, whether it's carnivore or keto or whatever it happens to be, is that you do spend some time understanding what your triggers are that can set you off in the wrong direction. So for him, he's got to look at what some of his choices are and make better choices. So for some people, that might just mean just not going to social occasions for a period of time so that you're not triggered into over-consuming food or drink that you don't want. One thing that I did was, for a period of time there, I was having like a couple of glasses of wine every night. It was probably about 6-9 months ago. After work, you just relax after work, have a couple of glasses of wine. And at some point I thought, oh, I don't really want to keep on doing that. But it was something that I enjoyed and I looked forward to every day. So instead what I did was I went and investigated some non-alcoholic options at the shop, and I bought some of those, and they were surprisingly good. And I was able to replace the alcoholic wine with a non-alcoholic version. I even got some sparkly stuff because I like sparkly things. And I'd end up going through the whole bottle, which was okay because I had 1/3 the carbohydrates and no alcohol. And then after about 4 or 5, I think maybe even 6 weeks of that, I just didn't feel like it anymore. So that was like a bridge from the alcoholic versions of wine to the non-alcoholic to just not having it at all. And then at the end of the day, now what I do is I just have some electrolytes basically, and that's what I do. So I suggested that to him as a possible bridge for him, and he's going to have to work out how he can actually take the behavior that he has and convert it into something else that actually works for him. And you might be the same too. There's going to be some emotional triggers that may cause you to want to eat comfort food, or what you call comfort food, sugary foods, high carb foods, processed foods, alcoholic drinks, anything like that. And it's worth noticing what a particular events, occasions and situations actually bring up those strong emotions, and then I think firstly, just have a look at them, acknowledge them for what they are, and then see what you can do about modifying your eating behavior that in such a way that it works for you rather than it doesn't work for you, and it works for your health goals as well. I've been having a look at some of Dave Feldman's work. So for those of you who don't know who Dave Feldman is, he's just an everyday guy who noticed that when he had his triglyceride levels checked with his doctor, they were very high. And his doctor, I think, wanted to put him on some sort of medication. And so he started to do his own investigation into this particular phenomenon. And he's coined a term called the lean mass hyper-responders. They are people who are typically quite lean, have low BMI, low percentage of body fat. And when they take on a ketogenic or a ketovoric or a carnivore diet, their triglyceride levels end up being not just in the top 10%, but the top 10% of the top 10%. So the sort of levels that would cause the average doctor to become very concerned and think that you're going to die of a heart attack anytime soon. So what he did was, rather than just take his doctor's word for it, he got what's called a CAC, which I think stands for a cardiac arterial calcification score, which is done using it's not invasive, but it's very accurate. So like an MRI and a sonogram, something like that, the two combined allow a very clear picture of the arterial arteries to be shown and to be able to see how much plaque is in the arteries. And his score was very low, if not very low, it was 0. So he took it upon himself to actually put together a study of people who had been following a ketogenic diet and were also what he would call lean mass hyper-responders. So they're people who are quite athletic and also had these very high triglyceride scores and have been eating that way for at least 4 years. And there's been a study of about 60 people, and I won't give you all the statistics, but I'll put a link to the study in the description. Essentially, more than 60% of the people that have been followed in this study have a CAC score of 0. And I don't think there's any of them that have a score over 12. There's only a couple over 12, and that's a score, I think, that's out of 40, if I remember correctly. And obviously that goes against traditional medical dogma to say that the higher your triglyceride score is, the more at risk of heart disease and arterial plaque and arterial calcification you are. I also wanted to do a bit of a shout out to Dave Mack, who's another influencer in this particular space. I forget the name of Dave's channel now. I'll link to it down in the description. But he recently put out a video talking about a doctor here in Australia. There was a complaint lodged with the Australian Medical Board because he was inappropriately reversing type 2 diabetes by using a ketogenic diet. I thought that is just incredible. I think it was a dietitian in his hospital actually reported him. And I thought, how do you inappropriately reverse someone's type 2 diabetes with diet? And it just spoke to me like the systemic influence that is there amongst peak bodies like the Dietitians Association of Australia. It's a video that's well worth watching, and he was reported to the Australian Medical Board, and then he ended up being exonerated, he along with another doctor who was also reported for something similar. And the more interesting part to me was the fact that there are some very large and powerful organisations involved with the whole thing to do with diet and food choices and government bodies and things like that. So what I mean by that is, if you take the Seventh-day Adventist Church, for example, and they are very much strict vegans. Now, I don't have a problem with people who are vegans. I think for me, what's more important is that you stop eating processed food. If you can do that, then you're on your way. Nonetheless, they very heavily promote veganism. But what I found interesting is that the biggest processed food company in Australia, which is Sanitarium, is wholly owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And not only that, but it means they also don't pay tax because they're a religious organisation. And they're also a corporate partner of what used to be called the Australian Dietetics Association. I think it's just called Australian Dietitians. They've made a name change. Sometime, I think it was about 2017, that this is one of their partners as of about 2018. And you have to wonder, about this sort of insidious connection between them. Here you are, you've got a big organisation, a very powerful organisation like the Seventh-day Adventist Church that owns a very profitable company that produces all kinds of processed foods that millions of Australians eat, that is arguably making their health much worse. You have to wonder whether their agenda is something other than our best health, don't you? You have to wonder whether the fact that they're affiliated with a peak body in the dietitian's world, whether there may be some influence on those people who choose to register with that body and be recognised as a registered dietitian. I don't think we can afford to just ignore some of these facts and some of these connections with big organisations and powerful organisations, and their connection with the lobbying that they do with the government, and then government bodies, and then government regulations, and then government guidelines. I really think you've got to question everything. You've got to look at all of the facts, and you've got to look at all the connections, and especially when those particular connections and affiliations aren't declared, it should give you pause. It should give you pause and make you go, there's obviously a hidden agenda here, or there's obviously a benefit to these organisations by recommending this way of eating for us, even though it's not actually the best thing for us. Open your eyes and gather some facts, follow the evidence, make your own mind up about it. I'm looking at my sous vide cooking my brisket for the third time, because the last time I cooked the brisket in the sous vide, the boys ended up eating it, I wasn't here. Finally, I'm actually going to take this out in about an hour, and then I'm going to go and sear it and try it out and finally publish that video, which I think I started about a month and a half ago. I talked about channel monetization last week, and a lot of you are very interested in hearing and learning more about what's involved with channel monetization. This particular channel isn't yet monetized. I'm about 220 watch hours away from that, so I reckon probably 3 or 4 weeks and the channel will be monetized. And then a couple of months after that, I think I'll then go through and look back and explain the monetization process and how long that took, etc. And hopefully it might encourage some of you to actually start your own channels and help spread the word about eating the carnivore way and just generally being healthier, getting more exercise. There's a group of people that I participate with, Kerry Mann from Homestead How, working on the carnivore diet movie, and Stan, who's one of the people that are in that group, he recently used the YouTube API to gather some data about how many channels are actually talking about the carnivore way of eating. And in his estimate, there is around about 500-ish. And now 3 months later, he's actually queried that data again, and he's found an additional 65 channels. So obviously the topic of eating the carnivore way is becoming a lot more popular. For those of you who are just starting out, or maybe you're thinking about it, I've got loads of cook videos on my channel. I've got another video which talks about how you can actually get started eating the carnivore way. I do a lot of these sort of segments just talking about mindset in general. But I do encourage you to do your own investigation. Don't just take everyone's word for it. Don't take my word for it. Don't just take Dr. Berry's word for it. Sure, go and watch some of his videos, but go and watch some other doctors as well and see what they have to say. And especially read testimonials from actual people who have been eating this way for a long time. And it is not anything new. That's something I really want to stress. Eating the carnivore way is not a fad diet. People have been eating this way for centuries. And if you look at civilizations like the Inuit from Alaska, although they're harder to study now because of the influence of Western civilization on their diets, but if you look back over hundreds of years, the plants don't grow in that part of the world, so their diet consisted almost entirely of meat, and they were absolutely devoid of any sort of metabolic disease of any kind. That's just one example. And you've also got the Maasai in Africa who only consume meat, milk, and also the blood of cows. So that's another example of a civilization that's been eating that way for a very long time. So if anyone says to you that's just a fad and it's going to fade away soon, you just have to consider the facts rather than taking that at face value. Now, I think this video here might be a good one for you to check out next. Yep, that's a good one for you. You can take a look? Or you could hit the like button somewhere down there, or subscribe, or you could do all three. So check out the video and subscribe. That'd be great. See you later.